Closing time. Open all the doors and let you out into the world.
First down and 10, and Cutler looks to throw. Pressured by Ansa. Got rid of it. Floats up and intercepted by Glover Quinn. Playing in his 100th consecutive game. And once again, the pressure came from the Pro Bowler Ansa. And now the teams start to get together with Ansa and Cutler having words.
If you're listening, whoa. Sing it back and whoa.
Yes, you are listening. It's the end of the year for the Lions, but it's far from the end of anything here at the Detroit Sports Podcast and Hindsight 20. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. As always, I'm your host of the said show, Hindsight 20, Jerry Mallory. The Lions end the year at 7-9. I mean, if you think about the way they started, the way the second half went, there's so many reasons why this team could have folded, the number one pick, giving up on the coach, yada, yada, yada. Say what you want. They ended this year, pretty close to 500. They ended this year with an opportunity of hope and optimism, not for the changes, not for new players, not for a new coach even. They ended the year with a hope of optimism for a few of the guys that are on the team. No, it's not all sunshine and roses, but hey, I'd rather be in this position than looking at your Tennessee Titans and your Cleveland Browns of the world. And we have a lot to talk about on this show. Before we do, I hope you like lists. I hope you like awards, so to speak. I love lists, by the way. And if you do, you're in for a treat. It's not the last episode of Hindsight for the year, but it is the last game after episode. It's the end of the Lions year, the end of the Lions season. And so we're going to wrap it up talking about so many things pertaining to the best and the worst about the team, about individual players, et cetera, et cetera. Before I go any further, DetroitSportsPodcast.com, it's the premier spot. Okay, the way this thing is going, we're gaining momentum. We're like that snowball that started off as, small, meager, and we pushed it down the hill. And now it's getting bigger and bigger. It's gaining momentum. It's getting faster. This is what the Detroit Sports Podcast is. If you have an Android phone, go ahead, do Podbay. It's a really good app, and subscribe. If you're an iPhones type of person, that's cool too. Nothing against you. Go to iTunes, subscribe. It's not just me. You hear me every week, every Monday. There's tons of other listening content. You've got Tigers Talk. You've got fantasy. You name it, it's here. Doc and Jock. It's all here. Detroit Sports Countdown. We have special shows throughout the week, depending on interview opportunities. Once a month, you even have a Pistons show hosted by myself and my cousin Kevin Evans. So by all means, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Spread the word. If you're listening, thank you. Tell a friend. Tell that friend to tell a friend. We're gaining momentum. We were that little snowball. We're rolling down the hill. And we're not looking back. As was mentioned, this is going to be it's a bittersweet type of episode. For me, I look forward to the Lions season, okay? I don't care what my expectations is that year. Even when we were, coming off of 0-16, you knew we were only going to get so good. There's always a reason. There's always an optimism. For me, Lions, it's number one. It's king in terms of my viewing pleasure, in terms of my love and fandom for any team, any sport. Like I tell people, sports and entertainment, it's leisure, it's entertainment, okay? It doesn't come over family and friends, and for me, religion. It doesn't trump those things. Sports never will. But in terms of secular things you enjoy to indulge and to be entertained, some of you may say this is very sad, but Detroit Lions is number one for me. So I always look forward to this season beginning, and by the same token, when it ends, and unfortunately, it's usually after week 17, game 16. Very rarely is it after a playoff game. When it does end, it's bittersweet. You look back and, you're hopeful for the things you've done good, but it's bitter because it's over. We will be wrapping up several things. We have the top 3 moments of the year, the bottom 3 moments, top 3 surprising players, top 3 players underwhelming. I mean, we have list on top of list, moments, you name it. And we're going to end this thing talking about the one and only Calvin Johnson. I don't have this huge speech prepared, but I do have some thoughts and some comments about the man and what I think we should do and what I hope happens in terms of his future. But not just that, some thoughts on him as a whole. No, I'm not getting choked up. I just had to clear my throat there. I know that's not like, podcast or radio 101, but what do you want me to do? So let's talk about this Bears game. And this was one of the games where, yes, the Bears, they didn't play a lot of people, okay, on offense, Alshon Jeffrey, namely being one of them. But I was interested to see what Stafford could do on the road against a pretty good pass defense. Before this game, the Bears were number 4 in terms of pass defense. It's a combination of having a pretty good rush. John Fox's scheme is working out good. And they've got some decent corners, notably Kyle Fuller. And Stafford did good, okay? Another clean game, no turnovers, right there near 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. So I was very pleased to see that. And clearly, you're looking at Calvin Johnson. You can't help but look and say, man, is this his last greatest catch? Is this his last greatest touchdown? He was holding on to that ball. I know you noticed it. I did too. Like, is this the last one? It was the same on the other side of the ball where you had Alshon Jeffrey not playing. And so, is it his last time or game as a Chicago Bear, but also Matt Forte. Forte has carved himself out a really nice career. And by all accounts, the writing is on the wall. You have Langford there, the rookie who looked well. They've done this before. Thomas Jones was doing his thing. They draft Forte. Forte looks good. Thomas Jones out the door. The same now is happening for Mr. Forte. Probably his last game. So you're looking at his touchdown. Is it the last one? These two teams don't have a ton to fight for. And at the end of the day, what you end up fighting for is respect, an opportunity to inch closer to 500. Some will say, hey, you should lose because it helps you in terms of scheduling the next year. It helps you in terms of the draft order. But both of these teams gave it a go. And it was really good seeing Glover Quinn, who is becoming an Iron Man. Stafford becoming an Iron Man. These guys have been out there on the field in terms of amongst their peers and their positions. They've been out there more than anyone. And so it was cool. And then, yes, Ziggy Ansah getting one more sack. I mean, he closed this year off very close to being the leader in sacks. He didn't get it, but he was right there. And what an impressive year. Without Sue, without Fairley, all these guys who, Ziggy's going to get all the attention and now he's not going to be able to do this and that and the other thing. Well, that wasn't the case. He went out there and he had himself just a wonderful year. And so, it's a good way to end it on a win with some momentum. And hopefully it carries over. It has before. It's not, a guarantee. It doesn't automatically mean the following year you'll be right there and taking off where you started or where you ended. But it is a good indication. We've seen it time and time again where, teams, they struggle and then they end the year on a high note. And that very next year, it carries over. And that's what we're hoping is going to happen to this team. I mean, 7-9, you see an uptick. A couple of balls bounce your way, could have been a better record, and you carry it over and see what can happen in the following year. So let's go and give you the first of many lists. This is the bottom 3 moments next to the top 3 moments. So it's not necessarily a particular game, although most of these are talking about a game. I mean, that's what's most important in the season is the schedule. And the games that you play. But there are some situations in particular games and moments outside of actual football in which both categories will have representation. So we're going to start off with the bad. It's the bottom 3 moments, of the year. And we'll go from number 3, work our way to number 1. So the first one was a doozy, okay?
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
I'll give it its own special drop. It was the loss against Seattle. And it was a screw job. It wasn't egregious. We had opportunities to win the game, but it was a call that directly affected the outcome. Now, Calvin Johnson did fumble. It's not his first time doing that in a costly game, a costly situation toward the end. He did it in 2013 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. So, We're 0-3 at this point. It's looking bad. It's a roll game. It's Monday Night Football. I mean, everything is stacked up against you. You have the defending NFC champions who were starting off slow, but you expect them to take off, and they're always difficult to play in Seattle. And we looked lousy early on. But some type of way, we stayed in this game. The pass rush was there. I mean, we were getting after Russell Wilson, and I'm sitting there with some buddies. We're at, where did we go for this game? We went to Dave & Buster's, and, man, the Lions are still in this thing. And it's at the end, and they have this drive, and it's like, wow, we have an opportunity, and we knew how hard the 5-game stretch was, okay? I was like, hey, if we could just win 2 out of the 3, things will get much better. Ooh, child, things are going to get easier, You win that game, and, as good as Arizona looks, I was all about the momentum game and saying, hey, you beat Seattle, it kind of carries over. It probably wouldn't have, but it's such a costly game. You can play the what-if scenarios in your mind. I don't like to do that too much, but for all of us that say we're anti-what-if, everyone plays the game, okay? If you're sitting here and saying you don't do it, you're a liar, okay? We all do it. It's whether you agree that it matters or not and this and that, we all play the what-if game, and this is probably one of the biggest what-if moments. If we win this game, how does this affect the rest of the year and seedings? This was a team that we'd been fighting for a wild card spot with a game in hand, and of course the way it went down, okay? We know it was not clean. It was not upright. He fumbled the ball, but the linebacker, was it KJ Wright, definitely tapped it out intentionally. Should have been the Lions' ball at the 1-yard line, but it did not go that way. So that's definitely number 2 in terms of, number 3 in terms of the worst moments for me. This is just my opinion on things. I'm looking forward to hearing by means of comments and emails. You can follow me on Twitter at Jerry Mallory NFL. Also, Hindsight20 at gmail.com, Hindsight20podcast at gmail.com. I'm looking forward to hearing your top moments as well and bottom. And this one is at number 3. So at number 2, and we have a lot of candidates, unfortunately, this year, especially in the first half. But this one gets its own special drop. It was a dark moment for the team, unquestionably. It was the massacre that happened in London, okay? Kansas City. This was the beginning of the ultimate realization that, hey, this team might be the worst in the NFL, not just, bad. This was before Kansas City went on that run, okay? They did not look back. We lost to a good team. At the time, they looked horrible, okay? And we just let go of Mr. Lombardi, and Jim Bob Cooter is in. We knew that, for the most part, we wouldn't see a lot of Jim Bob's, his structure, his offense just yet. You're traveling overseas. But to get embarrassed, it was a complete 180 of the exhilarating moments and the excitement that we had when we faced the Atlanta Falcons last year in London. We just got beat down bad, okay? Now, something happened after this game that was good, but this is just talking about the game, okay? Right after. This is before something really good happened in connection with London. This was before we knew that the Kansas City Chiefs were a really good team that just started off slow. Right after the game, we were stuck with the old regime. We were stuck with everything, looking horrible. Yes, Lombardi was gone, but the offense still did not look good yet. And we lost to what we thought was another bad team. And you're looking at 1-7, and you're like, you know what? Fire everybody, and we might be, really bad. Like 2008, 2009 bad, a very dark moment. But, if we're talking about number 1, is there any question? What's number 1? The worst moment. It's going to go down as not just one of the worst moments of 2015. It's going to go down as one of the worst moments in regular season Lions history. Every time we play the Green Bay Packers, every time they're in a last-second situation for the next 10 years, I'm going to say, maybe even more, every time we're in the last second, I don't even want to say it. You hear the song in the background. Hail Mary situation, you're going to see this when you're looking at the clips. Man, I'm getting choked up talking about it. No, not really, but yes, it's the Hail Mary. Okay, guys? It's the Hail Mary, and it's not even close. You remember the podcast, the irony of me playing this song, Hail Mary. I don't play Hail Mary every day. I'm not like somebody that's just playing 1990s rap all the time. Okay, it was based on a movie I saw. I played Hail Mary before this game, and I put up that Lions flag that we lost so much when I waved it and drove around with it. I put it up, and just, all the irony, and for those that are superstitious, the things that I did, but most importantly, the way this game went down. Opportunity to win 4 in a row. I think 9-7 is an actual possibility or reality if we win this game. You look at the game against St. Louis. We only lost 2 games in the second half. Green Bay, the Hail Mary, and St. Louis. I don't think, the games that we won go differently. We beat those teams fair and square. We beat them handily with some road games, New Orleans on the road, Chicago. Those games probably go as planned. I do think the St. Louis Rams game was a bit of a hangover. Now, St. Louis went on to win a couple of more games, and so they're decent. So maybe we lose that one no matter what. But I just got a feeling, you look at how dry and how beat down and sullen we were affected by just a horrible outcome of a game. You have an opportunity to sweep Green Bay. You have an opportunity to move forward. You're still in the playoff hunt. You're the hottest team in the NFL. And you get Tupac Shakur. Man, oh man. Horrible season. And in many ways, that was rejuvenated, and there were some comebacks and reasons to have optimism. But of all the uglies and negatives, this takes the cake as the worst moment in 2015. All right, that was ugly, guys. We talked about the bad. Let's talk about some good moments, okay? I mean, goodness gracious, that was pretty depressing. If you stayed with us for this, I appreciate it. Thank you. Let's talk about some positive things. It's the top 3 moments of the year. We'll start off with the Thanksgiving game. It capped off the 3-game winning streak in impressive fashion. It's national TV. You're riding high. The regime situation with the change, and now the coordinator is starting to get his fix, and Stafford throws 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. Everything was it was an awesome game, okay? And you're starting to say, man, maybe this team can make some type of wild run for the wild card. It was still unbelievable and far-fetched, but there was still a little bit of hope. It was the 3rd game in a row. We were rolling. Things were looking good. And it really made the excitement for that following week. And 1 week after that game, it was Green Bay. It made the excitement all the more present. The atmosphere for Thursday night football against Green Bay was so extravagant early on and pumped up because you're facing a rival, because you have an opportunity to sweep them, because you have an opportunity to still go 9-7 and have a slim playoff shot. But it's all predicated on the Turkey Day win. It was awesome. It was a laugher. We needed that. So many close games and down to the wire, and just to see the team go out and do what they did. Ziggy with the turkey dance. It was an awesome moment, and it was the second best moment for me this year in 2015. Now, number 2, it was the regime change, guys. I mean, we thought it would happen, especially after 1-7, but it kind of came out of nowhere, at least for me. The firing of Tom LeWan and Martin Mayhew. And it was something that I was glad to see, not just because of what it meant on the surface. Those guys are gone. It kind of spoke volumes about what we have with our new owner, with Martha Firestone Ford. Remember, with the boss, with William Clay Ford at the helm, what was one of his downfalls? He was loyal to a fault. He held on to guys just too long. It took him too long to make the changes. And so you kind of saw a difference with Martha. Not only making the firing, but making it in the middle of the season. It sent a message. It sent the message that, if things are going to be different, I'm making decisive moves. I expect better. I want to see improvement now. And guess what? It happened. And you started to see improvement from the team. And I think it lit a fire under some of the guys. And I know Caldwell had to be feeling it because he knew what was coming up next for him. He was about to be gone. But, no matter if they would have bounced back or not, just having the regime change meant, these guys that robbed Peter to pay Paul in the cap, that made some questionable decisions, it's time for something new. And it showed that our owner is a little bit different. Now, what happens next is going to be the most important step. But the fact that we kind of made this move right now, instead we could be sitting here talking about the firing just now happening. And then we have to find the search firm. Then we have to find the president. Then we have to find the consultant. Well, by having this firing happen during the bye week and mid-season after London, we're ahead of the curve. And yes, we still have to make the two big hirings, the GM and the coach. But the president, the search firm, and now the consultant is already in house. You have Rod Wood as the president. Love him or not, in-house, forward boy, however you want to word it, we have him. We're not looking for him. And yes, Ernie Accorsi. There are going to be a lot of firings, regimes, not just coaches, Bloody Monday, as I like to call it, hack and slash Monday, murder Monday is coming. And it's not just going to be coaches, it's going to be GMs and presidents too. We're a little bit ahead of the curve. We were the first out the gate to, get the search firm that we wanted, get the consultant that we wanted, instead of waiting in line or competing with other ones. And so this was the second highlight, top moment of 2015 for me. Now, number one, it's Lambeau, baby. Winning in Lambeau Field. I was so sick of hearing time in and time out about the losses and hearing about the last time we won. It was the biggest monkey, okay? And it finally got off of our back. It finally allowed us to say, hey, we beat a team on the road, Stafford, with an above 500 record. Even if Green Bay loses, right now they're down 20-10. As I'm taping this show, they're going to end up 10-6 or 11-5. So Stafford has that road win. He has that win against a playoff team on the road. It was the ultimate garlic and lavender game. You remember? That was the creation of it. I mean, garlic and lavender has always existed, but that game was the creation of it for the Hindsight 20 show, where the nerves are running wild. You're taking your garlic pills because you're nervous, and you're spraying the lavender as it has a very soothing effect. This year doesn't have a lot of highlights. We know it. Even at 7-9, things were so sloppy, and the what ifs are plenty. But winning in Lambeau is huge. It's a monkey off the back. It's something we don't have to deal with. That old, boring, tired, played out narrative. It's over. We won in Lambeau. And, even if we win 11-5 or 12-4, winning in Lambeau after 20-something years will probably be the highlight for a regular season, unless you're clinching for just about any year. Let's talk briefly about Jim Caldwell. This is something that we'll be talking about more in the upcoming weeks. We have so much to cover, okay? It's going to be an exciting time. Potential coaching changes. Should Caldwell stay? Should he go? If he stays, if he's fired, I'll give you a few thoughts. I'm going to give, the good and the bad. He got this team and rallied them to a 6-2 second half, which is pretty big, okay? And it speaks a lot about who he is, and it speaks a lot about the type of players he has and how they're willing to play for him. It was the opposite so many times for Jim Schwartz. We start off 4-4, it's a little shaky, and they gave up on him. You lose 8 in a row. You start off 6-2, and a little bit goes wrong. You end the year 1-7 to go 7-9. Because Jim Schwartz wasn't that player's coach. Whether his narrative got old or whether his kind of being a douchebag just caught up to him. At the end of the day, the players, they're playing for themselves more than playing for the coach. Well, Caldwell, they're playing for themselves and they're playing for him. And so you have to give him credit for that. You have to give him credit for allowing his coordinators to do their thing. Because once Lombardi, who they should have got rid of sooner, was gone, letting Jim Bob do his thing, it proved to be good. And we know how good Terrell Lawson has been. And so, you got to give credit where credit is due in that aspect. But the negatives are still there, okay? Bad game management. And if you look at the past 2 years, even the 11-5 season, when we went up against superior teams, and oftentimes coaching that had more success, he got outcoached and he got outplayed. His players got outplayed. And even the 6-2 to end the year was good. It was against some teams that were about as good as us, a little bit worse. We've struggled against good teams. There's no denying it. You can look at the first half of this year where the schedule was bad. And even last year, our 5 losses were against superior teams by and large. Carolina, Green Bay, New England, Arizona. The only one where the team was probably inferior was the Buffalo Bills. But when we faced the better teams the last 2 years, Caldwell has been out coached. And so, there's good, there's bad. But should he stay? It all depends. The fact that we need a GM, as someone brought out on Twitter, CPS Trit, I guess I'm saying it right on Twitter, he made a great point. Why are we talking so much about Caldwell when it really is going to come down to the GM? And that's kind of where I'm at too. We could talk about him, but until the new GM comes, we really don't know. Supposedly the Fords like him. That may have a little bit of an impact, but if what they're saying is true, they're going to totally give it up to the GM. It's going to be his call. And then you have Jim Bob Cooter and Terrell Austin. Austin is gone, okay? He won't be back. It's tying into a question, our first question that we're going to answer. Jim Bob, even if there's a new coach, I think there's a chance that he stays because the offense started to click. The quarterback liked him. The quarterback, Stafford, look at the end of the year, how he ended the last 8 games, and even look at his stats as a whole this season. Very strong, very impressive. You would think you would like to keep that going. So I think Jim Bob has a great chance at staying, even with a new coach. All right, we've got 3 questions. We're going to intersperse them on this episode. We're not going to just do all of them rapid fire, 1, 2, 3. And so let's listen to the lovely Telly as she brings us our very first question.
At FBI Agent for Hire on Twitter says, any rumors or chance the Lions can retain Austin? Maybe promotion to head coach.
Like I said, this first question ties in with Jim Caldwell and the whole coaching staff. Nothing's out there right now. The only rumors is the fact that Terrell Austin is a prime candidate for other jobs. Supposedly he'll be interviewing for Cleveland this week. And so with that being said, we don't even know what is going to happen with Caldwell. If Caldwell is fired, unfortunately, we're going to be one of the last teams to get their head coach because we have to replace a GM first and foremost. So I think Austin finds somewhere to go before that. He may end up going to Cleveland. Wherever he goes, it's going to happen quick. It's going to happen probably during the playoffs. And so unless we strike really quick and we really want Austin and we have a chance to bring him in and interview him, I think it's all unlikely. The only rumors we're hearing right now is that several teams are interested. And so I think he'll be going and going fast. So let's talk about another list. This one is 3 names, relatively unknown, relatively disappeared, relatively quiet this year, that could play a bigger role in 2016. We're not going to pontificate and talk about these guys really long. This is a short list, and so I'll give you the top 3 names. One is Kyle Van Noy. Now, he's pretty much a rookie this year. This is his second year technically, but due to injuries in year 1, he played a very limited role this year as a rookie. We want to see more, okay? In college, he was known as a pass rusher. He was right there with Ziggy Ansah. They were always after the quarterback at BYU. He was actually a little bit better than Ziggy at BYU. We bring him in. So far, it has not been there. We've seen very small flashes, but there should be some changes with linebacker. Tahir Whitehead's a free agent. Who knows if he comes back or not. And we're probably going to see Stephen Tulloch get cut. And so look for Kyle Van Noy to possibly, if he can earn it, okay, have a bigger role. The other point, also that we want to bring out is that with the injury that he had with the hernia, sometimes it takes a little bit more time. And so, he was healthy this year, but next year we should see him at full strength 100%. I don't think even this year he was ever at 100%. Number 2 is Gabe Wright. Keep in mind, we traded this year's 3rd round pick, 3rd round, 16 in the 2016 draft for Gabe Wright, moving back into the 4th round to pick him up. The big man out of Auburn, he was a project, and he looked good at Auburn in flashes, but he was still raw even there. Tyron Walker might be gone. Jason Jones, who's a defensive end, but, he's on that line. Haloti Ngata. We don't know what's going to happen with all of these guys. There could be some upheaval. And hopefully, again, this was his legitimate rookie year. He gets to get out there and play a little bit more. After all, we gave up a pretty big pick for him. Last but not least, remember this guy in the preseason? All the hype, the Zach Zenner train, the ZZ man. Our running back got hurt early in the season, and he may play a bigger role next year. If they keep him, I think they will. Joique Bell might be gone. And I think with the 3 running back system that we're using, we're going to carry that on next year. We've got the lightning in Abdullah. You've got the phenomenal pass-catching threat in Riddick, and then you need a bruiser. That was Joique Bell. It could be a free agent if we cut him. It could be a draft pick. A lot of people talking about Derrick Henry. Or it could be Zach Zenner getting that shot. So those are 3 names who were relatively unknown / unproductive this year that could have a much bigger and more prominent role with the team in 2016. So we've got one more question that we're going to talk about before we get into our break. Telly, what do you have for us? What's question number 2 on the slate?
At DMiss25 on Twitter says, what free agents would you like to see retained by the new GM?
I like this question. So pretty much, we like to talk about the new guys, your Eric Weddles and Antonio Gates and Muhammad Wilkersons. We have some in-house players to consider. We have some people that we have to look at and say, hey, do we want to bring them back on the team? So I have a list. I'm going to talk about some notable re-signings I would like to see with some conditions. And then at the end, I'll talk about a few notable guys who are not on my list. So first off, it's Tahir Whitehead. He can play outside or inside. At the end of the year, he really kind of turned things around, played a lot better, and so I want to see him back. Haloti Ngata, he was very ineffective the first part of the season. Well, he went ahead, he got healthy, and at the end, he looked pretty good. If the price is right, he definitely, with his age and health concerns, it's going to be a huge cut for him no matter where he goes. And so if he's willing to take a substantial pay cut, I think he's like a $4 million player now. He had been getting $8 million and $12 million. If it's a $4 million type of cheap, veteran deal, I want to bring him back. Manny Ramirez, for depth. And if the price is right, he should be cheap depth. He's not going to get a huge contract somewhere. Tyron Walker, is he interested in another 1-year show me deal? Tons of potential. He signed the 1-year deal because, if he flashed and did what he had to do, he can get another big contract. He was offered a 2-year deal for the New England Patriots. He decided to do the 1 year to cash in on him having an effective year. He looked good early on, but he got hurt. Is he interested in another 1-year show me deal? Then bring the man back. Issa Abdul-Quddus. Now, this is the guy that really showed us, some flashes. He's the starting strong safety, and I'm signing him back. And he's the starting strong safety unless something else happens. I'm not closing the book on the position. If you can talk to Eric Weddle and get him for cheap, you want to make a splash on Eric Berry. You draft a guy that could fight for that spot. But I'm comfortable signing Issa Abdul-Quddus and saying, guess what? You are the starter at strong safety. Don Milback, it's the Bulldozer, Don Milback. You're bringing him back. And then, Lance Moore, he's a veteran, signed him for the minimum. He's used to the system. Bring him in. Now, here's some notable guys that I do not want to bring back. Jason Jones, James Ahedebo, Corey Fuller, and then you have Dan Orlovsky. Jason Jones is a good player. But Devin Taylor's really stepping up, and we'll probably be bringing in another guy, whether it's a high-price free agent for defensive end or a young project. It's only so many spots. And, Jason Jones, he's a Michigan guy, played at Southfield, but he's not coming back. If I was running things, James Ahedebo, if it's really cheap, sure. But like I said, Issa Abdul-Quddus is your starting strong safety as far as I'm concerned. Corey Fuller, TJ Jones, I think in the limited time he's played, has secured a spot as the young receiver. And Fuller, with all the speed, just never really able to get things done. Dan Orlovsky, simply put, we need a better backup quarterback. If Stafford gets hurt, this is not the guy you want coming in because your team is going to be down in the dumps. So I want a better guy at that spot. And Dan Orlovsky, meaning you're out of here. So those are 3 guys, or what's that, 4? Those are 4 guys that, they've been on this team for a year or two. They've been contributors. They all have something in common with the exception of Corey Fuller. They're a little bit older, and you have younger guys ready to take their spot. One last short list before we take that break. Most surprising unit, most disappointing unit. We'll start off with disappointing. It's the offensive line. Let's think about how bad they were. I can go on and on about it. It was the most disappointing unit, not even close, particularly at the right tackle spot. How bad, how atrocious were your Adrian Waddles and your Cornelius Lucases? Once Michael Ola came, it was like, thank goodness. We needed him so bad. And the flashes where he got hurt and Waddle or Lucas went back at right tackle, it was horrible again. The unit as a whole was disappointing, including Riley Reif, Swanson, you name it. The most surprising unit was the young secondary, man. Rasheem Mathis, James Ahedebo, due to age and injuries, they were out. Abdul-Quddus comes in. Nevin Lawson comes in. Quandre Diggs, and yes, we know how good Darius Slay was. It went from being one of the most worrisome and troublesome units on this team for some time to now being young, super talented, one of the strengths of the team. The young secondary definitely got things done, not just Darius Slay, but as we mentioned, Quandre Diggs, Isa Abdul-Quddus, and Nevin Lawson. And don't forget, Alex Carter, third-round pick. He's big, he's fast, physical, very smart player. Didn't play because of injury. He's going to come in and hopefully contribute as well. As you can see, this podcast is a little bit longer this week. We have so much to talk about. When we come back in the second half, we have another question to talk about. We have a little bit of draft talk. We have 3 most disappointing players. We have the top 3 Lions players for 2016. And then we'll end it talking about the one and only Mr. Calvin Johnson. Jerry Mallory here for the Hindsight 20 podcast. Your ad can be placed right here. It's simple. The Detroit Sports Podcast Network, we only support the best businesses. If you want your ad placed on this show, it's a growing podcast. It's a growing network. It's simple. Send us an email, hindsight20podcast@gmail.com. We're back on the Hindsight 20, and we're going to wrap this thing up with a little bit of draft talk, talking about the schedule, which we now know who will be playing, home and road, et cetera, et cetera. Disappointing players, the top players, and yes, we'll end this thing talking about one and only Mr. Calvin Johnson. So with this win, we're now at 7-9. The Lions will be picking 16th in the NFL draft. Now, if we lost, we could have been about 10, 11. So we win the game, but we lose about 5 spots in the draft, whatever. I'll be talking about that in just a second. As you know, we have quite a few picks this year. Now, we have our normal picks 1 through 7, minus the 3rd round pick. As we mentioned, we traded for Gabe Wright, so we don't have our traditional 3rd round pick. However, we will be getting a compensatory 3rd round pick with Ndamukong Suh signing with the Miami Dolphins. Now, we also will be getting a few more picks, and there as follow. We could be getting a compensatory 5th for Nick Fairley signing. Then you have a 5th round pick that you'll be getting because of the Denver Broncos trade. When we moved down in the draft, we picked up Ramirez. We picked up a 5th this year, and then we picked up a 5th in that actual draft. Also, we'll be getting a 6th round pick with the trade of Mohamed Cisse to the Seattle Seahawks. Man, that's alliteration. Cisse to the Seahawks. Seattle Seahawks. Wow. Cisse to the Seattle Seahawks. You know what? That's a pretty good tongue twister there. And you can even include 6 round pick. So let's try this out. You get a 6 for Cisse going to the Seattle Seahawks. I like it. So as a whole, we'll be having quite a few draft picks. We're picking 16, and that's right in the middle of the draft. That's a sweet spot for middle linebackers. You know, that's a sweet spot. Sometime a talented position player will fall, and so it'll be interesting. We're going to be talking about the draft a lot, guys, okay? Mock drafts, predictions, you know, who, what, where, when, and why. And the cool thing about the offseason, because when you're doing a show and it's minutes after the game, everyone's working. And so there are guys, whether they are on M Live or Detroit News or Private Detroit, that would love to join me on the show, but they're working at the same time I am. With the off season, we have an opportunity to do interviews during the week and talk about things. We don't have to talk about, you know, things that happen right at that moment because there isn't a game. Nolan Lasan, who's excellent over there at NFLDraftGeek.com. He'll be on a time or 2 or 3. And so plenty of draft talk to go around. But there we are at the 16th pick, right smack dab in the middle of the draft. Now, in terms of our schedule, on paper, the schedule should be a lot easier this year. Upcoming year. We knew this year was going to be difficult. And so what we have going on this year, as you know, we'll be playing Green Bay twice, Minnesota twice, Chicago twice. It's our division. We know how that goes. But additionally, we have Houston. We'll be playing the Texans on the road. We'll be playing Jacksonville at home. We'll be playing Tennessee at home. We'll be playing the Indianapolis Colts on the road. So that is the AFC South, the weakest division in the AFC. Again, we have home games with the Jacksonville Jaguars and Tennessee Titans, and then we have road games with the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts. If I'm being nitpicky, Jacksonville and Tennessee are the worst two teams in that division. You would have preferred to play them on the road because it's a bad team. Maybe you can get the win, and then you rather play home games against Houston and Indy. But, as it is, that's the AFC South. They're pretty weak, so we're glad we're playing that division. Then we'll be playing the NFC East, which is the weakest division in the NFC. So that's Washington, that's Philly, that's the Giants, that's Dallas. And then you have New Orleans, which, we played them this year. We were victorious. And then you have St. Louis. That's a home game. So, the schedule this year was really rough. And you're looking at Green Bay. And week 17, they're always at home. And I'm like, man, if I'm constructing this thing this year, I want to be playing the Green Bay Packers in week 17 next year at Ford freaking Field, man. I'm sick of Green Bay having a home game, and the last 3 years it's been for a clinching of the division. I don't remember in Chicago if they were on the road or not, but they played us at home to clinch. Right now, they're at home against Minnesota. They're down, but they're coming back. It's 20-13. They're trying to drive and win the game. And so that's one thing I want to see. And we had the Murderers Row, last year, 5 horrible games to open up the season. This year, give us a few softballs. Let me get, Jacksonville or Tennessee as one of my first games. Let me get, Chicago at home. Give me a few softballs. I don't want all softballs because you don't want the end of the year to be ridiculously hard. Give us some balance, okay? Give us a hard game, an easy game. As we know, so many things can change with scheduling. So you never know 100%. But those are teams that we'll be facing. Once again, you got Green Bay twice, Minnesota twice, Chicago. You've got Houston on the road, Jacksonville at home, Tennessee at home, Indy on the road. Then you've got Washington, Philly, the Giants, Dallas, New Orleans, and the St. Louis Rams. We've got one last question, kind of talking about the NFL draft. Telly, take it away.
At Jordan Erickson on Twitter says, does the 7-9 record make you upset because all we did was drop in draft order? See you next week.
All right, we will see you next week. We just signed Telly on to an offseason contract, so she will be returning. Thanks for the question, Mr. Jordan. The answer is no. I've been down this again. Draft picks are fine and dandy, but it's all about who's picking. It's more important to have the right GM as opposed to picking 10 versus 16. Plenty of talent can be had at 16 or later. It's all about having the right guys, and I always want my team to win. Okay, I want my young guys to show that they can win. I want Stafford to go on the road in Chicago and look good. I want Calvin Johnson to go on the road and look good. I want Ziggy Ansah to bring down Jay Cutler. So, no, I'm not upset about the win. I'm always cheering for them to do just that. And if you got the right guys, you have a pick later in the draft, which is cheaper, but it could be just as good as if you had a top 10 pick if you have the right guy and you know exactly what you're doing. So, we have a few more lists, and then we're going to end this thing talking about the one and only Mr. Calvin Johnson. So it's the top 3 disappointing players of 2015, and then the top 3 players of the year. So starting off at number 3, it's the worst unit, and I could have picked either one between Adrian Waddle and Cornelius Lucas, but I'm going to give it to Adrian Waddle. Lucas was an undrafted free agent as well as Waddle, but Waddle had a really good year his rookie season. They're at right tackle. He came in and it's like, okay, this guy is going to be legit. He's going to be the man that we can count on to be our right tackle of the future. Well, he had the ACL injury the following year. This year, he has been horrible. Okay, that first half of the year, Stafford got lit up. I thought Stafford was going to be stretchered out. I thought Stafford was going to be missing fingers and toes. You name the injury, I was fully expecting it. And the whole offensive line, is the culprit. But there was no bigger culprit. There was no bigger reason, no bigger, sieve than the one and only Mr. Adrian Waddle. And so, he's number 3. Very disappointing year. Expecting more from him. He could have easily been number 2. But number 2 is going to go to Stephen Tulloch, and you probably should expect it. You know what I mean? The age and the ACL Should have expected the rust. But I'm looking at this linebackers core, and I'm watching the Steven Tulloch comeback video, and he's hurdling and jumping and doing all these wild and crazy things. I'm getting hyped. I'm looking at him, and I'm looking at Levy, and I'm like, man, Tahir Whitehead had a good year. Maybe Kyle Van Noy steps up. This linebacking core can be ridiculous in a good way, and it was not. Now, some people will say, well, why isn't Levy on this list? If a guy was pretty much injured and did not play, I'm not putting him on the list. Levy, definitely disappointing of a season because we didn't have him. He was our arguably best defender, one of at least, and he was not there. And so very disappointing, but it was more so because of the injury as opposed to play on the field. Number one is Haloti Ngata. Now, this is a guy that really turned it up at the end of the season. And yes, he was unhealthy, and that was a big reason why. But I was just such a huge fan of Haloti Ngata, admiring what he did in Baltimore. But, you had the issues about maybe him using some steroids. And there was a comment about, I remember Baltimore saying, hey, we have a good chance of getting him back next year. So I'm thinking, man, we give this 4th and 5th for him. And they're already talking about a chance of bringing him back. And there's already rumors about him with HGH. Then he had the calf. Then he had the shoulder. And we just struggled. We were one of the worst teams in terms of run defense. We brought him in to be a run stuffer. And it just didn't work out. He really played good toward the end. So he may be back. You want to see him being healthy, But overall, when you talk about giving up as much as you did for him, 2 mid-round picks, ultimately, because you didn't have a 4th-round pick in the draft, you ended up trading your 3rd this year. So he's kind of bundled into that as well. He just didn't do what we wanted him to do, albeit being injured and playing a lot better toward the end. It was still very disappointing for me, and he's my most disappointing player for the Lions in 2015. Now, for the good, top 3 players of the year, we're going to start off with Mr. Matt Stafford. Say what you want about the man. Should he stay? Should he go? Okay, he went on a run at the end of the year, and I don't care who he played. It's the NFL. And, you look at this game against a really good pass defense, being the Chicago Bears, number 4, and on the road, he lit it up. And as pedestrian / bad as the beginning of the year was, he ended the year with 4,200 yards, 4,262, 32 touchdowns, which is the second most of his career, and only 13 interceptions. Okay, his passer rating was 97 for the whole year. You remember that magical 2011 that we love to talk about, and it was the greatest thing for him, and yada, yada, yada. His passer rating that year was 97.2. So essentially the same in terms of QB rating. He really stepped it up at the end. His rating was like skyrocket the last 8 games. If he played the first 8 like the last 8, he would have been one of the best, most productive quarterbacks. Overall, he did very well. And this year, as opposed to 2011, when people say, hey, you can just throw it to Calvin Johnson and you can get all these yards, yada, yada, yada. This year, yeah, you still had Calvin, but it wasn't, all the double teams that Calvin usually gets. It wasn't the Calvin you can just toss it up to and he'll catch a jump ball or he'll run by everybody. He had to use more receivers. He had to use Golden Tate. He had to use, Theo Reddick and different guys. It wasn't just zeroing in. You saw the progressions. You saw him reading defenses. He looked really good and comfortable under Jim Bob Cooter's system. You're hoping that Cooter comes back no matter what, no matter who the coach is. And so props to Matt Stafford. Number 2 is Darius Slay. He started off a little shaky. His second year in the league, he was looked at as one of the best young corners. Did it get to his head? Did he go for too many interceptions, taking too many gambles? I don't know. But he started off shaky. Even that Denver game, though, granted, it was bad statistically. It was like just 2 great catches, really, by Thomas and by Emmanuel Sanders. This guy just shut guys down toward the end, okay? People didn't want to throw his way, and he became one of the best corners in the league. And, top 10 corner and young, fast, all of the, and, right on cue, guys, okay? You remember earlier in the podcast why I said the freaking Hail Mary is the worst play for the Detroit Lions in the worst moment? And I said, we'll be hearing about Hail Marys time after time. Anytime the Lions, are in a situation where they got to, defend something, or the Packers are in a situation on cue. I got the Green Bay game playing, Green Bay versus Minnesota. It's a minute left. Green Bay's down 7. What do you see? Of course, you see the stupid infuriating, jaw-dropping, disappointing, soul-crushing Hail Mary. I knew it was going to happen. I didn't expect it to be in the middle of my own show. What was I even talking about? I'm sorry, Mr. Slay. Big play, Slay. Number 2, like I said, one of the best young corners in the league, and that secondary unit is looking solid. And for a while, we were saying, man, maybe Slay's a number 2. We got to bring in a number 1. He's a number 1 corner. And no matter if you want to roll with Lawson or Diggs next year, if you're bringing in someone else, it's probably going to be the number 2 corner, because Slay, he really showed all the talent that he has. And I think it's going to get even better, better and better. Number 1 is Ziggy Ansah. I mean, come on. Ziggy he lit the world on fire. His run defense has always been supreme. He's been one of the best run defenders in terms of defensive ends in the league. And people wondered, without Sue, without Fairley, would he fall off? Well, the production, 14.5 sacks. The man did what he had to do. He was the best Lion of 2015. So our top 3 is Stafford. Number 2 is Slay. Chris Gandy asked this question. He said, who's the best Lion this year after Ziggy? Well, there's your answer. It's Darius Slay. And yes, number 1 is the no-brainer. It's the no-brainer, Mr. Ziggy Ansah. Okay, guys, we're at the point in the show where we're going to close things out, and we're going to talk about the one and only Mr. Calvin Johnson. I mean, he's done so much for the team, and it's a potential that we just watched the last game in what has been a phenomenal career. And so let's talk about 81. And before we do, let's give him a little props. A huge catch for this game, which was monumental because it helped us get the win.
2nd down and 8 from the 36. Stafford with time. 1-on-1 for Calvin Johnson. Lays out. Pulls it in. Touchdown Lions.
How could you get rid of this guy after all the production he's brought to the Detroit Lions throughout the course of his career? You got to find a way to keep him in Detroit, to keep this combination together at quarterback with Matthew Stafford and Calvin Johnson.
All right, it's Mr. Calvin Johnson, number 81. We're closing the end of the year, end of the Lions season show, talking about him. He ended the year with really good stats, man. 88 catches, 1,214 yards, and 9 touchdowns. It's pedestrian for Calvin, but I mean, those are really good stats. Once again, another Pro Bowler. If this was his last game, it was against a foe. It was against the Bears. We all know about the Bears. His famous 9-catch was against them. And if this was his last game as a Detroit Lion, it was vintage Calvin, but then it wasn't. It was vintage in that he made some highlight reel catches. The diving touchdown. One of the reasons why he's just a freak and one of those guys that is going to go down in history as one of the best ever at the position. But then it wasn't, Usually when he catches the ball now, the yard of a catch, it just isn't there. He makes the great catch, but then he's getting tackled. We saw that in this game as well. And this is one of the reasons why he may be gone, because the cap is so high, and it's good. He's a great receiver, but just not what he used to be. Definitely not $24 million. I want to thank personally the Oakland Raiders, man, for passing up on him. I mean, he had Raider written all over him. The physical attributes, the speed, the size. They like video game players, okay? They like video game stats. They play the game like it's Madden, you know what I mean? And we want to thank the Oakland Raiders for passing up on him, because instead there was a guy that had some physical attributes and he looked good. I mean, he was a quarterback, Jamarcus Russell, one of the worst draft picks, huge bust. If it wasn't for that, we would have been stuck picking someone else. Now, this was a very good draft. It could have been Joe Thomas. It could have been Adrian Peterson. That's fine and dandy. But, we're more than pleased having the phenomenal player in Calvin Johnson. So we definitely want to thank the Oakland Raiders. The cool thing about this is these physical freaks, the combine warriors, the guys that just look like they were created, sculpted, and they're out of a video game. A lot of times, these guys don't pan out. A lot of times, they don't work. You know what I mean? It's not always a situation where the physical attributes are there, and so it's just a no doubt type of situation, and they're going to pan out. I can name you so many names, whether it's a Darius Hayward-Bay, whether it's an Aaron Curry. Vernon Davis has had a good career, but, the physical freak that he was, it hasn't really lived up to the hype. Calvin's one of those guys that lived up to the hype. He didn't have huge stats at Georgia Tech, but the physical attributes were just so amazing. People said he was going to be one of the best. It doesn't always work that way. And for him, it did. And this is one of the reasons why, you look at this and, he's been a part of some lean years, but he has been a bright spot almost every season in terms of whether it's a lean year, whether it's a playoff year. Calvin has been instrumental. I mean, the record-breaking year when we went 4-12, but he just caught the ball at a ridiculous rate. The 2011 season with all the touchdowns, he had 10 touchdowns through 5 games. The Dallas game a couple of years ago where Matt Stafford dove in, he just lit up. He passed at the receiving record, and Dez Bryant was all up in arms about it. This guy is the closest to Barry that you're going to get. Some people listening to this show didn't have the luxury of watching Barry. I grew up watching Barry, okay? 12, 13 years old, Barry Sanders was the guy. You know what I mean? And he got the job done, but he wasn't a headache. He wasn't a loudmouth. He wasn't a diva, and this is what Calvin was. And in an era where you have your Chad Ochocinco's and your Odell Beckham Jr.'s, your Terrell Owens, it's a diva position. Deshaun Jackson. I can go on and on. Fitzgerald's the same way too, but we're talking about Calvin. Never the diva. Never the guy that was getting in trouble off the field, demanding the ball more. There's been times where we always say, man, give the ball to Calvin. You never saw him complaining about it. Score a touchdown. He's not acting like a fool. If this was his last game, man, we're certainly going to miss him. Like I said, the closest thing to Barry in terms of phenomenal player, I mean, the parallels are scary. Phenomenal player, best at his position, freak athlete, kind of quiet, humble demeanor on and off the field. Maybe leaving Detroit, not getting enough wins, not having enough around him. Hopefully this is not the case for Calvin. I will say this before I tell you what I think we should do, our solutions, if Calvin stays, goes, etc., and then we get out of here. Usually I'm just the type of guy you cheer for the jersey. Once you leave, I'm not cheering for you. Grant Hill left, I'm not cheering for him. Ben Wallace, I'm not cheering for him. Sue, not cheering for him. Calvin's the exception. If he goes somewhere else, I'm not necessarily cheering for that team. I certainly wouldn't want to see Calvin do good against us, but I would be cheering for him, okay? And if it was a situation where it didn't affect the Lions, to see the team he was on have some success, barring going to the NFC North, okay, he goes there and all this goes out the window. But barring that, I would be cheering for him personally. I would be following him and hoping that he does have the success. But I do want it to be here, first and foremost, in Detroit. So what do we do? What are our options for Calvin Johnson? For one, I say we don't cut him, okay? And here's my reason why. You cut Calvin, you save $10 million or so, but you're paying him $13 to be on another team, man. And guess what? After you cut him and you save 10, that $10 million is going to go directly into your new number one receiver. And so you're paying Calvin $13 to not be on your team. You're paying that new number one receiver at least $10. That's $23 million. And so, yeah, that new number one receiver might be younger, but it's still $24 million set aside for your number one receiver. And I'd rather not cut him for that reason. And that's like that's the biggest reason. You could do sentimental and what he means to team. That kind of factors in, but the fact that you'll be paying him so much this year and in the following year, you'll still be paying him about $8 million. And so I say you do not cut him. I don't want that to happen. Now, the provision in which he would leave, I would only do this if someone offered us a pretty big deal, a sum in terms of trade. And I don't think that's going to happen because of his age and his cap hit. It would have to be at least a second-round pick, and it would have to at least be multiple picks if it wasn't a first-round pick. And I just don't think that happens. Now, if you do that trade, you're still in the hole, but you're acquiring key assets in a draft in which you have several picks. So that's the only reason I would be cool with Calvin leaving if someone just offered us a trade that we could not refuse. So what I hope happens then, obviously, is we do the renegotiation. You know, Larry Fitzgerald did it. It's to where Calvin gets the same amount guaranteed, but it's a lesser cap hit. It's a new deal, same amount guaranteed, so he's pretty much going to get 80 to 90 to 100% of his deal guaranteed. He makes the same amount of money, but it's less of a cap hit. You know, so, you know, he gets a deal 4 years, $44 million, but it's all guaranteed. So he still gets his 40 plus guaranteed that he's owed, but it's only 11 million on the cap as opposed to 20 something. That's a win-win. I hope he goes with that. If he really wants to stay here, he has to realize that, hey, I can get the same amount of money guaranteed and I free up another 10 million. And so that's another player we can bring in. If he believes in Jim Bob Cooter and Caldwell, like he says, and he loves the city, man, you can still get paid. And you just, you know, it's all guaranteed and it frees up more money. And we have a pretty good cap situation either way. Add the 10 million, you add the draft picks, and we get this thing going. Guys, it's been an interesting season. I want to personally thank all the listeners, okay? This is the first year, and I'm not leaving. I'll be back next Monday, but I want to thank everyone that's been listening. The interaction on Twitter has been great. The listenership has been awesome. I want to thank the fine folks, Doc and Jot, who gave me this shot, man. I mean, quite simply, I like their shows. I like what they were doing. I got some history with Prior Detroit and doing podcasts. I hit them up. They said, okay, let's hear what you got. I sent them a demo. Things got moving quickly, and here we are today. I'm thankful. I'm thankful for you all for listening. I'm thankful for them for the opportunity. Up and down season 7 and 9, we definitely closed it up on a high note. Hopefully you can carry over. I'll be back next Monday. We have so much to talk about. Coaching changes, potentially, GMs, drafts, free agent, you name it. Oh, it's about to get fun. If you think we had some fun in this first little smidgen of a season, we only did about 8 games. The off season, it breeds so much in terms of interviews and predictions and theories, fan interaction. It's time to have some fun, guys. I'll be back next Monday with my next show. Until then, this has been the Hindsight 20 podcast. I am your host, Jerry Mallory. Thank you for listening.